Mara does the imaginal work beautifully at night and destroys her peace by sunrise. Before sleep, she feels the conversation ending well, the body softening, the future becoming less hostile. For a few minutes, she is almost free. Then morning comes, the phone is in her hand, and she begins digging up the seed to see if it has grown. The first check is harmless, she tells herself. One message, one look, one scan for proof. But the old state is waiting behind the screen with a clipboard. No reply becomes evidence. A neutral tone becomes a threat. A quiet account becomes a sentence. By breakfast, the imaginal act from the night before is no longer a seed in the ground. It is a thing she keeps pulling into the light. The open loop here is tender. What should a person do after the assumption has been made? Not before, when effort feels obvious. Not during, when imagination has a clear role. After. In that strange space where the inner act is complete, but the outer world has not yet caught up, the old self often tries to regain control by checking, measuring, and worrying. This episode is a modern host-led commentary on Neville Goddard's idea of rest after assumption, often connected by students to the Sabbath principle. The focus is not a literal religious lecture or a promise of guaranteed results. It is a practical exploration of what happens when the mind keeps undoing its own imaginal planting by returning to the old evidence for reassurance. Rest is not laziness in this framework. Rest is fidelity to the assumed state. It is the refusal to keep replanting the seed because the soil is quiet. It is the discipline of not turning every hour into a courtroom where the 3D world is asked to prove whether imagination was allowed to mean anything. For many people, the hardest moment is not imagining the wish fulfilled. It is leaving it alone afterward. The imaginal act can feel powerful in the dark. The scene can feel natural for a breath or two, but daylight brings habits. Checking the phone, reopening the wound, telling the story again, searching for signs, and asking whether anything is working yet. Neville's influence on this topic is useful because it names a subtle problem. The person may claim to assume the end while emotionally returning to the beginning every few minutes. The mouth says it is done, but the nervous system says prove it. The imagination plants, but anxiety digs. Mara's pattern is familiar. She does a SATs scene before sleep, feeling a simple end, a warm message, an easy tone, a life no longer organized around uncertainty. She wakes with a little peace. Then a thought appears. If it really worked, there should be evidence by now. That thought sounds reasonable, but it quietly moves her out of the end and back into negotiation. Rest after assumption means noticing that exact transfer of authority. The outer world is not being hated or ignored. It is being removed from the role of immediate spiritual supervisor. The seed has been planted inwardly. The question now is whether Mara can remain in the state long enough for her own behavior, perception, and timing to stop being driven by panic. Use a garden image, but make it practical. A person who plants basil does not scrape the soil open every 10 minutes to evaluate the seed. The seed has its own hidden work. Soil looks uneventful while roots are forming. In the same way, an assumed state often begins by reorganizing attention, reaction, patience, and inner speech before any dramatic outer sign appears. The 3D world can be understood here as the visible field of current facts. Messages, money, bodies, rooms, schedules, faces, calendars, numbers, and circumstances. Those facts deserve practical respect. They do not deserve total authority over the inner state. Rest does not mean refusing to answer life. It means answering life without becoming a servant of every appearance. Here is the difference between rest and collapse. Collapse says, I did the imaginal act, so now I will avoid responsibility and call it faith. Rest says, I have accepted the inner end, so I will take the next appropriate action without desperation. Collapse is passive avoidance. Rest is calm persistence. Here is the difference between rest and suppression. Suppression says, I must never feel anxious, and if doubt appears, I have failed. Rest says doubt may visit, but it no longer gets to uproot the seed. A person can feel the tug of fear and still return to the assumed state without making fear the new identity. The first practice is called the after assumption pause. After any imaginal scene, before checking anything, place one hand on the table or the bed and say inwardly, "The seed has been planted. Now I live from the state." Then do nothing for 30 seconds except let the body remain in the chosen identity. Those 30 seconds are deceptively important. They teach the nervous system that completion does not need an immediate inspection. The old self wants to rush from imagination to proof, like a child running from a planted seed to a harvest basket. The new state learns to stay. Staying is the Sabbath in miniature. Mara tries this after her nighttime scene. She feels the simple end of being calmly received. Then instead of opening her phone, she leaves it face down. Her body protests. The stomach tightens. A thought says, check once just to know. But she has already seen that checking is rarely about knowing. It is about handing the old state a microphone. She lets the discomfort rise and fall. She does not dramatize it. She does not call it failure. She names it as a withdrawal from proof addiction. In that naming, something loosens. The absence of evidence is still there, but it is no longer the commander of the room. Rest after assumption also changes time. Anxiety treats every delay as a contradiction. Rest treats delay as the visible world moving at its own pace, while the inner state remains chosen. This does not mean every desire will unfold exactly as imagined. It means a person stops using delay as permission to return to the old self. This is especially important with relationships. If someone assumes being loved and then uses the assumption to monitor another person's every move, the state has become control, wearing spiritual clothing. A grounded practice returns to the inner identity, being loved, secure, respected, whole. From that state, communication becomes cleaner, boundaries become saner, and obsession loses some of its glamour. With money, the same principle applies. A person may imagine stability at night and then spend the entire morning terrorizing the nervous system with numbers. Rest does not mean refusing to budget, apply, sell, learn, or ask for help. It means doing those things from the identity of someone becoming orderly and provided for, rather than from the identity of someone being hunted by lack. With creative work, rest might mean sending the proposal and not refreshing the inbox until the agreed time. It might mean writing the next page without demanding applause from the last page. It might mean refusing to turn every quiet hour into evidence that nothing is happening. The seed needs darkness because the creative process often begins outside applause. The second practice is a no-digging window. Choose a specific period after the assumption, 10 minutes, 1 hour, 1 evening, or until morning. During that period, do not search for proof. Do not ask signs to certify the state. Do not retell the old problem to 5 people. Let the inner act remain planted. This is not a moral command. It is an experiment in authority. The person discovers how much checking has been functioning as a ritual of unbelief. The point is not to become rigid, but to interrupt the reflex that says every seed must defend itself immediately. During the no-digging window, replace checking with embodied normalcy. Wash a cup, fold clothes, answer a practical email, stretch the back, go outside for 3 minutes. The fulfilled state is often quieter than the chase. It does not need constant fireworks. It looks like someone who is no longer trying to squeeze certainty from every surface. Mara chooses one evening. After her imaginal scene, she does not check the thread. She makes tea, puts away laundry, and reads something unrelated. The old self calls this wasting time, but the old self has confused vigilance with devotion. Her calm is not neglect, it is loyalty to the assumption. A useful phrase for this episode is, stop digging up the seed. It is simple enough to remember when the hand reaches for the phone. Stop digging up the seed. Stop demanding that the soil produce a certificate. Stop turning the invisible into a courtroom. Return to the state and let the next right action be ordinary. The third practice works with the body. After the assumption, ask where the checking impulse lives. Maybe the throat tightens. Maybe the stomach contracts. Maybe the hand moves before thought catches up. Place attention there and breathe, as if the fulfilled state is not somewhere far away, but quietly present underneath the contraction. This is where rest becomes physical. The body has learned the old world through repetition. It may need repetition to learn the new state. One breath is not a failure because it does not erase years of tension. One breath is a vote. The body is being taught that it can remain safe without constant evidence. There is a powerful humility in this work. The mind wants to make assumption dramatic because drama feels like control. Rest is less dramatic. It is the quiet refusal to panic. It is the choice not to accuse the day of betrayal because it has not changed fast enough. It is the courage to let the invisible have a season. Neville's Sabbath idea, in contemporary commentary, can be treated as the cessation of inner labor after the desired state has been accepted, not the cessation of life, not the cessation of useful action. The cessation of striving to become what has already been assumed inwardly. That distinction protects the practice from fantasy. A student may still study, work, communicate, plan, heal, apologize, save money, take medicine, consult professionals, and make decisions. Rest does not remove responsibility. It removes the frantic identity that turns responsibility into proof that the assumption failed. Consider a man named Julian who imagines himself employed after months of discouragement. He finishes a short scene before sleep, closing a laptop after accepting a good offer, feeling grateful and steady. The next morning, 2 applications are still unanswered. The old pattern would be to collapse into a narrative of rejection. Instead, Julian practices rest. He reviews his plan, improves 1 application, and takes a walk before sending it. He does not pretend the offers have arrived. He refuses to let silence become his identity. He acts from the state of someone employable, useful, and in motion. This is rest with shoes on. That phrase matters. Rest with shoes on. The restful person may still move. The difference is that movement is no longer a tantrum against uncertainty. It becomes congruent action. The state supplies the tone. Action supplies the channel. Time supplies its own unfolding. The 4th practice is the morning catch-up ritual. When waking after a night of imaginal work, do not let the first reach be toward proof. Let the first reach be toward the state. Before the phone, before the feed, before the old story, place attention on the fulfilled identity and let 1 sentence form. The sentence could be, I do not need to dig today. Or, I can live as the person who has accepted the end. Or, the world can catch up while I remain steady. Choose one that feels less like a command and more like a return. The tone should be calm, not frantic. Then choose 1 sign of rest in behavior. Maybe the phone stays away for 20 minutes. Maybe the account is checked once for planning, not 10 times for punishment. Maybe the message is answered with warmth instead of hidden panic. Maybe the body gets breakfast before the mind begins its trial. Rest after assumption is not about forcing certainty. It is about practicing trust at the level of identity. Trust here does not mean assuming every outer detail will obey private preference. It means trusting that becoming internally loyal to the chosen state is a better way to live than being whipped around by every appearance. This grounded caveat is necessary. No spiritual practice should be used to deny danger, avoid medical care, ignore legal realities, or stay in harmful situations. If outer help is needed, get outer help. The Neville-inspired point is not to abandon wisdom. It is to stop letting fear become the only intelligence in the room. Mara's story turns not because the phone suddenly glows with perfect evidence, but because she stops making the phone the altar. Some days the reply is still absent. Some mornings the numbers are still plain. Some conversations still require courage. yet her state is less easily kidnapped. That is the first harvest. When the old self asks, "But what if nothing is happening?" rest answers differently. It does not argue for 20 minutes. It does not panic scroll for signs. It says, "Something is happening in me when I remain faithful to the state. My perception is changing. My reactions are changing. My next actions are changing. I am no longer feeding the old assumption every hour." The fifth practice is a revision of checking. At night, recall one moment when the seed was dug up. See the hand reaching for the phone, the mind searching for proof, the body bracing. Then revise the moment gently. See the hand pausing. See the breath returning. See the self choosing rest and doing one ordinary thing from the end. This revision is not self-criticism. It is training. The mind learns by imaginal repetition. If the day contained a panic ritual, the night can rehearse a different response. Over time, the revised response becomes more available in waking life. The hand pauses before the app. The mouth stops retelling the old story. The nervous system remembers another option. The open loop from the beginning now resolves. What should a person do after the assumption has been made? Leave the seed planted. Guard the state, not the evidence. Take appropriate action without desperation. Let the 3D catch up without being whipped into a daily audit of whether the invisible is allowed to work. Rest is the bridge between the imaginal act and the lived identity. Without rest, imagination becomes a spark that anxiety keeps smothering. With rest, the spark has oxygen. It can become tone, choice, patience, timing, and eventually a different pattern of life. There is also a quiet dignity in rest. It says the inner act is not a beggar. It does not need to run into the street holding a sign that says, "Please prove me right." The assumed state can sit down, breathe, and behave as if it has a right to exist before the outer world applauds. If this practice feels difficult, that is not a sign of failure. It means the old habit of checking has been serving a purpose. It may have been trying to protect against disappointment. Thank the nervous system for trying to help, then teach it a calmer form of loyalty. Protection does not have to look like panic. For the next 24 hours, choose one assumption and one no-digging window. Keep it modest. Do the imaginal act simply. Then let the window be sacred in a practical way. No checking, no retelling, no bargaining with signs. Live from the state through one meal, one task, one conversation, one quiet hour. At the end of the window, notice what changed inside, even if no outer proof arrived yet. Did the body soften? Did the mind become less theatrical? Did action become cleaner? Did the old story lose a little speed? These are not small results. They are signs that the assumed state is becoming inhabitable. A sixth practice is the seed journal, but it is not a place to beg. On one page, write the assumption in a single sentence. Under it, write the actions that naturally belong to the state. Under that, write the checking rituals that would dig the seed up. The journal becomes a map of loyalty and sabotage. For Mara, the assumption is simple. I am calmly received and no longer auditioning for affection. Natural actions include sleeping, working, answering with warmth, taking care of her body, and letting mutuality matter. Digging rituals include rereading old messages, imagining hidden meanings, looking for signs, and asking friends to analyze silence as if it were scripture. The seed journal makes a subtle truth visible. Often a person does not need more metaphysical intensity. They need to stop feeding the opposite state. If the chosen state is calm reception, then panic analysis is not neutral. If the chosen state is provision, then shame spirals around money are not neutral. If the chosen state is creative confidence, then constant comparison is not neutral. This does not mean every old habit disappears overnight. It means each habit can be recognized as food for a state. When the old self asks to be fed, the person can choose another meal. A walk can feed steadiness. A clean budget can feed provision. A kind boundary can feed being chosen by one's own life. A completed page can feed creative identity. The seventh practice is delayed interpretation. When a fact appears after the assumption, refuse to interpret it immediately. Give it time. A message that looks cold at noon may be explained by evening. A number that looks final on Monday may become workable by Friday. A closed door may protect attention for another opening. The old state rushes to interpret because it wants to keep power. Delayed interpretation does not require naivety. It simply refuses emotional prosecution before the whole scene is visible. The fulfilled state can say, "I see the fact, and I do not yet know what it means." That sentence is profoundly restful. It interrupts the habit of turning first impressions into final law. Julian uses delayed interpretation with a rejection email. The old habit begins its speech. "This means no one wants you." He stops it halfway. The fact means one company said no. It may mean the application needs adjusting. It may mean his energy belongs elsewhere. It does not mean the assumed state must be abandoned before lunch. This is where rest becomes intelligent. It can learn from circumstances without being humiliated by them. It can adjust a plan without bowing to despair. It can hear a no without making no the name of the future. The 3D is allowed to provide data, but not allowed to write identity. A common question arises. How can someone rest without becoming indifferent? The answer is that rest and desire are not enemies. Desperation is the enemy. Desire can be clear, tender, and alive, while the state remains steady. A person can want the relationship, the work, the healing, the home, the creative breakthrough, and still refuse to let wanting become self-abandonment. Think of rest as holding the desire with an open hand. The hand is not empty. It is not pretending not to care. It simply refuses to become a fist. A fist cannot receive well. It cannot feel nuance. It cannot act cleanly. It is too busy proving that fear is in charge. When Mara lets her hand open, she still cares. She still hopes. She still has human tenderness around the desire, but she is less controlled. She can go through the evening without making the phone her pulse. She can hear music again. She can wash her face slowly. She can become a person, not a surveillance system. This is one of the most compassionate parts of the Sabbath idea. Rest gives the soul back its ordinary life. The old self thinks devotion means constant mental pressure. The restful state discovers that devotion can look like ease, humor, breakfast, a focused hour of work, or sleep that is not interrupted by another evidence audit. The eighth practice is aligned completion. Before bed, ask, what would make this day feel complete from the assumed state? The answer may be a small repair, a note written, a room straightened, a prayerful imaginal scene, or simply putting the phone away. Completion is not proving the desire arrived. Completion is acting as the person who is no longer spiritually unfinished. Mara's aligned completion is to leave the thread unread after 9. Julian's aligned completion is to save tomorrow's application list and close the laptop. A creative person's aligned completion may be 5 honest paragraphs, not a viral response. A person practicing health may choose rest and medical follow-through, not magical denial. The form changes, but the tone is steady. The ninth practice is the catch-up sentence. Whenever the outer world looks delayed, say inwardly, the visible scene can catch up while I remain faithful to the state. This sentence does not force a timeline. It protects identity from the impatience of appearances. It allows facts to move through time without becoming a whip. The catch-up sentence is especially useful in the morning. Morning consciousness often returns to the oldest story quickly. Before the day can gather speed, the state needs a gentle anchor. The sentence offers one. It reminds the mind that yesterday's silence is not a command, and today's first thought does not have to be inherited. A 10th practice is the evidence fast after good signs. This sounds strange, but many people dig up the seed even when something hopeful appears. They receive one warm message and immediately demand another. They see one movement and begin measuring whether it is enough. Rest means not turning good signs into a new addiction. When movement appears, receive it without clutching. Let the good thing be good. Let one encouraging fact remain one encouraging fact, not a demand for a perfect chain of evidence. The fulfilled state can appreciate progress without becoming possessed by it. This is how rest protects both peace and momentum. The final enemy of rest is the belief that worry is love. Many people feel that if they stop worrying, they have stopped caring. But worry is not the same as care. Worry is care mixed with the fantasy that suffering gives control. Rest offers a different devotion, care expressed through presence, wise action, and loyalty to the assumed state. A practical way to test this is to ask what worry actually produces after the assumption. Does it make the message kinder? Does it make the body wiser? Does it make the work cleaner? Sometimes it produces a short illusion of control, then leaves exhaustion behind. Rest is not less caring. Rest is care without self-injury. There is also a social layer. Many people keep the old assumption alive by retelling it. They call someone and narrate the fear again. They make the story vivid, recruit agreement, and leave the conversation more identified with the problem than before. Rest may require protecting the seed from unnecessary retelling. This does not mean isolation. It means choosing conversations that support the state rather than conversations that keep rehearsing doom. A trusted friend can help a person return to wisdom. A frantic committee can help a person dig faster. The restful state learns discernment about where attention goes after the imaginal act. The 11th practice is a one-sentence boundary around the seed. If someone asks for an update and the old story wants to perform, answer simply, "It is unfolding and I am staying steady." Then change the subject or speak about the next wise action. The sentence is plain, but it stops the desire from becoming entertainment for fear. Mara uses this with a friend who loves analysis. Instead of sending screenshots and asking what every punctuation mark means, she says, "I am letting it unfold and taking care of my evening." At first, that feels almost too quiet. Then it feels clean. Her desire is no longer being passed around like evidence at a trial. The 12th practice is rest after action. Many people assume, take action, and then punish themselves while waiting. They send the email and reread it. They apply and obsess. They speak honestly and replay every word. Rest after action says, "The action is complete for now. I return to the state instead of chewing the action into fear." This practice is especially useful for creative and business work. A proposal can be sent and then released until a reasonable follow-up time. A video can be published and then the next craft task can begin. A sales message can be delivered without refreshing metrics every few minutes. Rest protects the dignity of completed action. There will be moments when practical follow-up is required. Rest does not forbid timing, reminders, negotiation, or repair. It simply asks that follow-up come from the state, not from panic. The difference can be felt in the body. Panic follow-up grabs. Restful follow-up communicates. Panic follow-up begs the world to calm the self. Restful follow-up participates in life from steadiness. The catch is that rest may feel unfamiliar enough to be mistaken for emptiness. If a person has lived on adrenaline, calm can seem like nothing is happening. But calm is not nothing. Calm is the ground where a different identity can take root without being trampled by constant alarm. The soil is quiet because roots do not shout, so give the quiet a chance. Let an evening be less dramatic. Let a morning begin without an audit. Let one desire remain planted without being dragged through every emotion. That quiet is not proof that the assumption failed. It may be the first sign that the old state is losing its favorite instrument. There is one more refinement. Rest should become specific, not vague. If the assumption concerns communication, rest may mean no screenshot analysis tonight. If it concerns money, rest may mean one clean financial action and then no shame browsing. If it concerns creative work, rest may mean sending the draft and returning to craft instead of measuring worth through response. Specific rest gives the mind instructions it can follow. Vague rest often dissolves under pressure because the old habit finds a loophole. The person says they are resting, but they still check indirectly, still ask leading questions, still rehearse the absence. A clear boundary closes the loophole. This evening, no checking. Tomorrow, one practical review. Tonight, the seed stays planted. This is how the 3D is allowed to catch up without being worshipped. The visible world remains part of life, but it is not dragged into every private panic ritual. Facts get their appropriate appointment. The state gets the throne. Between those two, daily life becomes calmer, more usable, more human, and less constantly haunted by the need to know immediately. Mara learns that the seed is protected by ordinary choices. A charged phone left across the room, a walk taken without narration, a conversation that does not become an investigation, a bedtime scene completed without a midnight audit. None of it looks spectacular, yet each act tells the state, you are real enough to live from before proof becomes visible. If a desire matters deeply, it deserves a cleaner atmosphere than panic. It deserves action that is not poisoned by compulsion. It deserves patience that is not passive, faith that is not theatrical, and attention that does not keep reopening the wound. Rest is not giving up on the desire. It is giving up the old state that kept mishandling it. The final takeaway is calm and demanding. Rest after the assumption is made. Let the 3D catch up without making it the judge of every breath. Do not dig up the seed to prove that planting mattered. Protect the state by living normally, wisely, and steadily from the end. Tonight, when the imaginal act is complete, let it be complete. Let the phone rest. Let the soil stay closed. Let the body learn that peace does not need constant certification. The assumption has been made. Now the practice is to become the person who no longer keeps asking the old world for permission to remain there.